Hello everyone, and welcome to our new meetup of the series An Evening With. Hello. So I'm here today.
Hello.
Happy to have two special guests. So we do have Manuel Pais. Hey, Manuel.
Sorry. Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. And Alberto Brandolini. Ciao, Alberto.
Hello. The not so special guest.
Not so, always special. So we have Manuel, who is one of the authors of Team Topologies, which we are going to talk about in a second. And Manuel also recently became part of our team of trainers. We're going to talk about that as well. Alberto Brandolini, or Zio Brando, as you can see, and you know him for that probably, founder of Avanscoperta and famous for being the author of EventStorming. So today, as said, we talk about Team Topologies, which you will see in the background that we have here on the YouTube. Let me remind you, you have the YouTube chat just down here for asking questions while we talk to Manuel and Alberto. I see that some of you already started talking to us. Hey, Betty. Hey, Morten. Good to have you with us. Please keep asking questions whenever you feel like. At some point during the evening, we're gonna stop and read them out loud. So Manuel and Alberto will be answering them. And also, if you are from mobile, just to let you know, you can watch the video and go on the chat as well. YouTube is not gonna go crazy for that. So that's my quick presentation. Hello, Kansu. So I'd like to welcome Manuel again and ask him. So today we're talking about team topologies. So my, let's say, very basic two first questions are, so what is team topologies, first of all, and how did the idea of writing the book with Matthew Skelton, hi Matthew, who is the co-author of the book with you, came about?
Sure. So maybe I'll start with the second question, which leads to the first one. I was working together with Matthew. We were doing consulting for different clients around the world, mostly on DevOps, continuous delivery. And so this was about 5-6 years ago. And kind of the joke, if you like, that we had is that many things that we recommended to clients, we had to really, they were often not easily convinced because, you know, there's a lot of different forces inside an organization, you know, people with different opinions. And so, you know, why would they listen to us, right? So the joke is if we have a book, then that just makes it all much easier. Then they can read the book and understand what we're saying. So that's kind of the joke. But really, what happened was that we saw typically organizations were asking for help with practices and tooling around DevOps, continuous delivery, which was all fine, and we could help them. But then we would see issues around how teams were interacting or not interacting, you know, and how often teams were kind of left to their own devices in some aspects, you know, just implement some stuff, especially the development teams, or operate some systems for operations teams, and so on. And we saw this anti-pattern, if you like, where teams don't really know with which other teams they should interact with, how should they ask for things, whose responsibility is to do X. And so as we were helping these different clients, we started to see, you know, there are some patterns here that we could explore. And, you know, it started actually with something called DevOps topologies, kind of the precursor to Team Topologies, but it was more of a static view on different ways you can set up teams for DevOps, you know, patterns, anti-patterns. And so we started to see, you know, there are ways in which we can talk about responsibilities of a team. We can talk about interactions between teams with some useful patterns. We also started talking about cognitive load and things and other aspects like that, and Conway's law, which already existed for a long time. But there was a vocabulary that started to appear as well. As I was discussing these things with Matthew and talking to clients. And so we thought, there's a good kind of a consistent, cohesive way to talk about teams and focus on teams and how they can support fast delivery and fast, product development and feedback and all those things that we're trying to achieve. Most organizations are trying to achieve. And then we went out and tried to validate this with other companies and other people, right? So it wasn't just from our experience where it had worked, but actually we started looking at case studies. Many of those made it into the book, of other organizations who had done similar things, maybe with different vocabulary perhaps, or without a specific vocabulary, but effectively they were doing similar things in terms of platforms, enabling teams, and looking at Conway's Law. And so that just helped consolidate the ideas that we had, and then resulted in the book Team Topologies.
That which leads me to my first question. Like from a DDD perspective, that is an area which is interesting a lot. Also for me, context mapping comes to mind, and the collaboration pattern between different bounded contexts. And one of the things that was bugging me a lot is that in some organization, nobody actually decides on collaboration. I mean, you staff the teams. You say, like, your team is going to deal with this, and your team is going to deal with this, and this is what people are doing, something between HR and architecture. But then establishing the patterns of collaboration, they just emerge because of forces who has the most crowded agenda, or there is no authority in this area. It's a no man's land, and so but this
and then it's
around this space.
Exactly, that's what we're seeing. And then you have this sort of often becomes sort of negative approach to the interactions. It's like, oh, we really must ask these people, you have to provide this to us. And that's not a very, I would say, if it's not a very humane way of approaching this, or it's not a satisfying way, because then you start to get into conflicts, and different teams have different schedules because of what you said. Each team is left to their own and saying, here's a bunch of stuff that you are responsible for, that you have to implement. But as the Russell Ackoff said, it's not the individual parts that are the problem. The problem isn't interactions or difficulties, but the interaction between the parts. And so the interactions between the teams are the things that we should be paying a lot more attention to, and therefore having concrete interaction modes, collaboration. We also talk about facilitating and X as a service as other types of interactions, which help us frame, okay, with which teams do I need to interact? What kind of interaction do I need? And why? And what are we trying to achieve? But there's still some gaps, I would say, in terms of, like you said, in an organization, especially if the larger the organization, who is looking after this? And yes, the teams themselves can be proactive and say, look, can we collaborate with you, let's say the infrastructure team, to find a better way for us to have a bit more autonomy, and maybe we use some Terraform or whatever tools that common tools, so that we can do more things on our own as a development team. But still, you would like that at an organizational level, there is that sort of thinking that, okay, we need to understand the difficulties in the interaction between teams. How do we get the team of teams to move in the right direction together, right?
Yeah, and it's also interesting that if there is no specific role doing this, there is nobody you can, let's say, lobby for, and the empty space feels like, people need to reach an agreement. They don't know they actually can sometimes, and this agreement is expensive. The more teams are connected, the harder it is to reach a consensus about the collaboration. And do you have any specific maybe story, maybe ingredient for success in this area, or the thing that you look at in order to steer a transformation into this into a healthy direction?
Yeah, so effectively what we're talking about is, first we start with Conway's law and understanding if you have systems that are connected, have dependencies between them, then the teams responsible for those systems will also have those dependencies, right? So the idea of Conway's law that there is a sort of mirroring effect on the structures of the teams and communication between teams in terms of systems that you can achieve. So we start from the point of view, which obviously it's common to, I think, in general, to DDD and other kind of thinking about our software architecture, which is have more loosely coupled architectures, right? So have parts of a system that have a very clear responsibility and things they have to do, and that ideally communicate, asynchronously or loosely coupled with other parts of the system that do other things, but without having a synchronous dependency. And that's sort of the same thing we're trying to achieve with teams. First, let's look at how we can, if you like, increase the autonomy of each of these teams, but it's never 100%. Especially, the more complex systems become and, organizations grow and they provide more services to their clients and they do more things. And so there's always dependencies, but we're trying to minimize the dependencies on the first place. And then for those dependencies that exist, let's try to address them better. We can track them, we can have interactions, specific interactions, and we understand when are we going to need to, maybe collaborate with this other team to define, a new boundary and some new interfaces so that we can decouple better our different parts of the system. So I think if we look from the organizational perspective, this sort of approach is still kind of new. I think in part, organizations are still learning. You see some good examples, but you see a lot of, I would say, Scrum-focused organizations. Scrum first, they want to focus on teams being able to, doing Scrum to deliver features and not thinking about the whole. And on the other hand, you have HR often looking at individuals. So they're looking at, who are the best performers and worst performers and training budgets for individuals. So that's all not very aligned with the idea of team first. And so I actually had in one training, I had someone tell me a very interesting, how their organization was structured, which was just a couple level at the top, like the CEO and some head of department. And then underneath, they just had teams. There was no kind of very formal organizational structure. It was just teams to get work done, and then they rearrange and reorganize as they need. So that's an interesting way where, yes, you need some organizational structure to make sense of what company is, what we're trying to achieve. You also need that flexibility where teams are going to need to interact between them, and they should be able to decide and understand when we need to collaborate, when we need to have service provided by a platform team, and so on.
And probably also, how much I took note of what you were saying about making communication, making dependencies asynchronous also in terms of conversation and communication between teams. Which means do I need the support of another team? Well, probably yes. As you said, not every dependency could be taken away, but is this, am I blocked by the other team? This is one of the things that could actually kill the collaboration, because then the key to my deadline is into somebody else's hand. And so I'm not the owner of my future anymore, and bad things can happen.
Yeah. And so that's actually a really important point, that we kind of need to understand the nature of dependencies. So we know there will be some dependencies. It's kind of naive to think that teams are just autonomous in a vacuum, right? And I think that's where Agile has good ideas, but it really helped teams become more iterative and so on, all that stuff. But it's, in some senses, it was taken to the extreme of teams are going to be autonomous. And so we actually have a lot of people who are Agile coaches who are interested in team topologies because they realize, it's not, there's always going to be dependencies. So what you were saying, I think, is we need to have more clarity. Are these dependencies healthy or unhealthy? Are they blocking us, or they're okay? It's just someone else is providing some service that I need, but I'm not blocked because maybe it's a sort of self-service pattern. I just consume this service and that's fine. And so therefore, if we can track dependencies, then we can start addressing, is this healthy or not? How often does this happen? And that's what I do with teams when I'm helping clients is, okay, let's talk about your dependencies on others. How often does this happen? Does this block you when it happens? Or is it, is it sort of annoyance, slows you down a little bit, or it's okay? We depend on them, but we never have to wait or get into some conflict because we don't have what we need. It's just, it works well. So we can track those dependencies and then try to address the painful ones, right? If we depend on infrastructure team to provide every time we needed some new resources, that's clearly going to be blocking very frequently our work. And so if we want fast flow, then we should, let's collaborate. Let's propose to collaborate for a period of time to see how we can minimize the impact of this dependency. Maybe we can start by having autonomy to create some kinds of resources by ourselves, and other things that are more risky or whatever, or more costly, maybe it's still another team that's the owner. We start to address these things over time with the idea of minimizing the blocking dependencies and at some point being able to remove them.
Yeah, I like what you said about we cannot get clear of all the dependencies, because I see a lot of black and white, all or nothing type of reasoning. Oh, you always will have dependency. But this is not an alibi to do nothing. It's just like every dependency has a cost. Just getting rid of one is making your life a little better. Categorize them, find the one which is making your life more painful, work on this one, and then repeat. You're never gonna end like, now we have no dependencies anymore. Yeah, it only happens if you leave the company and found a new startup. But still, every dependency has a cost. So
you try to move away from blocking dependencies to non-blocking dependencies. That's kind of the basic idea that if we want fast flow, right? If we want, and not every organization maybe wants to achieve fast flow, but in today's world, most do. But you might have some scenarios where, we have a monopoly or something where we just want to optimize for execution. And then maybe it makes sense that we have very stable requirements and we just have all the pieces, lined up, and this team does this and then this one does this. But that's not the common case today.
Yeah, I was actually thinking like a common case that I saw in some places is the kind of mandatory dependency, like which is so you have a platform with team, be it a good platform team according to the definition of the book, or some teams that name themselves we are the platform team. But it's also one of the things which is bugging me in some organization. If you are delivering higher value services on top of the platform, you have to use the platform. And I found out that this was working well with a good balance between the teams. But as the number of services on the top were increasing, well, the platform team still was not getting up to speed. And the upper team started to complain like, oh, we have to use the platform, but it's never ready for us. And so two problems here. One, the platform which is never ready. And the other thing is the platform which is actually slowing down instead of enabling. And it was interesting to see some of the discussion, like the platform is an asset, is making everything go faster. And then you talk with the team, no, the platform is actually slowing us down. If you want to go faster, we get rid of the platform. But the platform was mandatory, there were other ideas in between. And what is your? You've probably seen more than this than I have, so I'm totally curious.
Yes, definitely. I've seen that happen very frequently. There is this idea that this, like you're saying, this is the platform is going to make everyone better and go faster. And it's not exactly like that. We have to be more, we have to qualify that more specifically. And so whenever you have a platform that's mandated on the teams, that means the platform teams don't have an incentive to look at and worry about the experience of using the platform. So that's something we talk a lot in the book. We have to, if the platform is used by developers, we have to think about the developer experience. And so we talk about looking at the platform as a product in itself, consumed internally, but as a product. That means you don't push this product on people. Like, I'm not obliged to buy iPhone. I have an Android. I have a choice. And so we're talking about the same sort of approach internally because of what you said. If a team feels like, this doesn't meet my needs or it's very cumbersome to use, then I shouldn't be using it. I should have an option. Maybe I have even a SaaS offering that does what I need. And so if we don't do that, we're actually increasing the cognitive load on the teams, because not only they have to understand their product that we're selling to our external customers, but they also have to understand how does the platform work, and maybe what are the workarounds I need to do to actually get what I need from the platform. And so we need more of a balance where we say, okay, the platform, yes, should provide, good services that most teams need, but we shouldn't impose them. It should be an organic adoption. And
sounds like a buffet.
Yeah, and the next question that most people ask, okay, but what about then every team is doing it differently? Well, that's a sign that maybe the platform is not really focused on the needs of those teams, right? Why would they do it differently if the platform can do it for them in a way that's easy to use and understand?
Yeah.
And it's also a process. Yeah, over time. It might take time where teams, aren't doing this because historically we had this, monitoring tool that was set up and we used it. And so I need a bit of time to adopt the platform service that, it's a good fit, but I need to do the transition. And so when we impose the platform, we're imposing schedules, we're imposing cognitive load, and that's not very team first approach. Right?
Yeah, and then it depends a lot, like team size. I mean, if the organization is 2 or 3 team, it really feels like reinventing the wheel. If the organization is 20 team, well, maybe in some of these 20 teams, they had a better idea on the platform. And the top management might be worried about reinventing the wheel, and some developer might say, like, this has never been a wheel. This is an hexagon. I don't want to use it. I want to use the proper wheel. But it really changes. And also one of the common objection, if we give developers freedom, then every team is going to use their own solution. But it's never like this. You're never going to have 20 teams with 20 different solutions, because that's not a good pattern for this. Like they will aggregate around some of the winning solution anyway. So maybe 2 or 3, and then it's probably okay. That's the market winner. The Darwinian selection has been played in this round, and maybe that's going to be the next platform.
And we go back, I think, here to the importance of interactions, the importance of discovery, because also a sort of anti-pattern that we see is that if you have a platform starts to be successful, you start to have a lot of requirements, especially if this is mandated, and teams are going to have a lot of requirements, and they're going to get into this mindset that, well, that's the platform responsibility. I'm just going to wait for them to do it, and then I'm going to maybe start pressuring, when is this going to be available? And you start to look at the platform team or the platform roadmap starts to become huge and inflexible.
Yep.
And so we're getting to this cycle where we're trying to catch up with all the needs, but we're not even thinking about, the needs are changing. And so if we have a more flexible approach where we say, the platform is focused on, the minimum number of services that are really important, and we allow the teams we call stream-aligned teams, or, or development teams, if you like, to find solutions also for their problems if the platform team is not able to respond in time, so that we have more of an ecosystem. And some companies have been very successful, for example, using inner source, where they say, here's the platform, you can send some requests for changes, and if we make it very easy to understand, how is this pull request going to be accepted or not? Do you have to do do you have to create some tests, automated tests, or do we just do a code review, or do you need to update some documentation? The platform team can make that very clear. How can other people contribute and add to the platform so that they don't necessarily depend on us to do it? So you get into this more dynamic sort of approach to evolving the platform based on the needs of the teams. And so, but I've definitely seen very often that the platform is mandated, and that brings a lot of challenges.
Cool. I'm actually looking at what is happening on our channel, and maybe there's already some question that we could ask. So
let's go with the first that was asked by Morten, actually 10 minutes ago, which with the quality of content you've delivered looks like a long ago, but we'll read it anyway. It's going to show up on the screen now. So Morten asks, do you have any examples of approaches for development teams, stream-aligned teams, if you will, that doesn't have the luxury of having all the skills needed, like not enough front-end skills, which links to the next question I'm going to read later on.
Okay. Yes. So again, we're talking about in Team Topologies about this ecosystem of teams, right? And one of the types of teams are enabling teams. So ideally, but this happens in almost every organization where there are some domains where you don't have enough people with the skills that you need, right? Not enough to have every team with, in this case, in your question, you don't have enough people to have a front-end expert in every team. So enabling teams can help there by providing the knowledge, right? So enabling teams are sort of on the ground, helping facilitate, helping mentor and teach the teams that need help. So we might have just, maybe we only have a few front-end experts or UX experts is another common domain where we don't have enough people for all the teams, where their roles changes from doing the work to actually helping the teams understand what they need to do. Again, like similar to the platform, it's going to be a process over time, right? It's not that we say a team that has no skills in front end will get some, mentoring for 2 weeks and then become an expert. That's obviously not how it's going to work. But the enabling team is going to meet the development team where they are now, in the sense of what knowledge they have, what are the gaps, and address the main things that they need today. So maybe they need to know about some basic frameworks for front end so that they can start using them in a simple way. And as the development teams or stream-aligned teams progress their own knowledge, the enabling team can come back and help them with more advanced topics. So now you need to, there are some other things you should be looking at now that you understand sort of the basics. So you need this sort of ecosystem of platform teams, enabling teams, and the stream-aligned teams that are focused on the actual products or services that we're selling or providing to customers. And it's that sort of team of teams that allows the evolution that you need without being kind of prisoner, between quotes, of having all these experts. And many organizations, their kind of first reaction or only reaction is to say, well, we need to hire more front ends. Well, probably you need to keep some hiring process ongoing because it's hard to find enough people. So you can keep that going, but not create a dependency again here, where for a team to evolve their skills, we depend on hiring someone, because that's it's not very effective. The hiring process might take months, and so you probably have experts in your organization. The thing is that the way they approach their expertise should change into more of a mentoring and teaching.
Yeah, it made me sorry. This is just a funny memory. I remember being in a meeting and then one of the managers said like, "Oh, we just hire some developers," and I wanted to die because it's not that easy anymore, and they're not gonna join your company if you think this way. So it's, but yeah, end of the memory.
Yeah, or hire some Kubernetes people and we'll just set up Kubernetes.
Yep.
So the next one, thanks Manuel, first of all, is from "The Time is Fake." And I guess this came about when we were talking about the feature, the platform team, and the cycle of catch up. So again, as I said, it really links back to the one we just talked about.
Yep.
Doesn't that just create a huge dependency and constraint on the throughput of your team? Wouldn't it be better to just learning the skills needed with your team then?
I guess the question is, does the enabling team become a dependency, right, on streamlined teams? That's a very good point, because we don't want that to happen. We don't want to create a new dependency. And so it's very important for the enabling team or whoever is in that sort of role of facilitating knowledge and skills and helping upskill, to understand their role is to teach, right? It's not to do the work, because it's very easy if I'm expert in, let's say, in test automation. So I actually did some test automation for part of my career. It would be very easy for me to come to a team and say, well, you just need to, use this tool and let's, code this test, and now you just do it yourselves. But that's not really teaching, right? That's not mentoring. It's very different. What I would need to do, as if I'm in that sort of enabling team, is to first understand what are the gaps in that team, what do they need to learn today, not kind of generically everything that they could possibly learn in this domain. All the best practices that you hear a lot. People talk about best practices, but it's not something that I can just say, oh, here are 50 pages of best practices you learn and you read them and you do it. That's not how it works. So the enabling team and the people in those teams need to have this mentoring approach. We're understanding the team needs, what are the gaps, and we help them in that journey of learning the skills, right? But never do the work for them. Otherwise, it's a dependency, and next time we have a problem in this domain, we're going to need the enabling team to come and do it for us. So that's not the goal.
Yeah, it maybe also think like, in general, we would like the answer, but let's say if planning and deadlines are messed up, there is no solution for that. I mean, the stream team is going to be responsible for the delivery date. The enabling team can help, but also if you are a Scrum team, you should be able to raise the red flag. Look, the delivery date that you promised using this front-end framework or this other one is not good. So I cannot blame the enablers. It's just like the deadline is not reasonable, and that's that's usually the tougher call to make. And
it's again having non-blocking dependencies, right? We maybe depend on this enabling team to help us upskill, help us learn what we need in this domain, but it's not blocking, right? When we're working on whatever we have to deliver, we don't depend on the enabling team. So we have this separation between the delivery work and kind of the upskilling. But of course, you have as a team, and that's something interesting that I've seen. I think because of how kind of historically people expect engineers to just learn stuff by themselves and to be learners or do it in their part-time, which is kind of a to me it seems a bit toxic culture of expect people to learn when they're supposed to be with their family or have other activities, because we are not just engineers. Obviously, people who really like to have work on other projects or open source, that's great, but shouldn't depend on that for the organization, for the team to learn. So we need to make space in the organization and in the teams to learn and to be able to acquire skills that the team needs.
Excellent. Please, sorry, go ahead.
Just to add, so the team needs to be aware of that, right? So that's what I wanted to say. Sometimes teams are kind of shy, or because of this culture, they feel like they shouldn't be saying out loud things that they don't know, because inside the team there is this culture as well that we can just learn it by ourselves. We just look at documentation, we try it out. Yes, you can do that, but the learning curve is very very high. Whereas if you have people who are experts helping you, kind of guiding, curating your learning journey, it's just going to go much faster, much more focused.
Yep. And I'm actually, this is one of the things where we, I guess, agreed already in the background, but I found references to Daniel Pink, Autonomy, Mastery, and Purpose, and I use these references a lot in when talking about bounded context and how to measure the health of a team. And some dependencies are okay, but if they are killing my autonomy, if I can blame somebody else for my failure or for my being late, or just could have unpredictable delays because the other team didn't deliver what was promised, that's not a healthy place to stay. It just takes all the joy of working and delivering stuff, but also creates a possibility of a continuous blame game, conflict between teams, and so on. And so the ultimate responsibility, the autonomy to make choices and to say, I don't need to learn, I'm faster while I'm learning by myself, might be a local choice. But I guess the container, the ideal way to think might be in the area of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That might be one of the things to look at. If it feels right from this perspective, it's probably maybe the best available trade-off where you are.
Yeah, I agree. Those are often, ends up being what makes people in the team feel engaged and feel productive, is to have that sort of those intrinsic motivators doing well. And so, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And purpose is interesting because there are different kinds of purpose, right? There's the purpose of the team, which ideally you buy into it. As part of the team. Yes, we're trying to deliver the best, payment service possible. But there's also individual purpose. Some people like to become experts in some domain or some technology. Other people like to kind of have a bit of everything, understand a bit of everything. More generalists, if you like. Some people really like getting feedback from customers, and others maybe not so much. And so we should be looking into this in terms of how does this individual purpose or individual motivators fit with the type of team, right? Because a streamlined team should be, people should have interest in getting feedback and improving the service that they're providing. If that's something they don't like, if they want to be experts in, testing, or experts in front end, maybe they're a better fit for an enabling team.
Yeah, or maybe just some of the underlying technologies, when doing domain-driven design, we are looking for developers which want to be as close as possible to the business. But this is not an obvious thing. Some developers, well, no, I'd like to be close to the technology. This is what I'm good at, and get fit for a platform team, or maybe for an enabling team if they are really good with that piece of technology. And totally get that. rewards and incentives and motivation is individual and should be visible at the team level. I mean, the team should match the individual goals, and totally makes sense.
Cool. I'll go for another one. We have Radislav, who asks about the front-end dependency and teaching. I had a similar situation, and teaching recommendation was turned down because it would affect current performance. How to answer to that?
So it's part of the answer, or one possible answer, is that you need to, again, think of enabling teams as necessary, right, for the ecosystem of teams. So if you have people and you have a team that's dedicated to teaching and to facilitating knowledge, then you don't have the situation where you're trying to, if you're only looking at specific circumstances where we need help, and so does it make sense or not? And we get into this cycle, sort of vicious cycle where, we need the experts to do the work, and we need them to be 100% on executing the work because they're the experts and we're late and we need to move faster. But we end up hitting the same problems, that teams are lacking the necessary skills to be more autonomous and have more mastery. And so, yes, there is at some point a shift that is needed in the organization to think, okay, it's not just delivery teams, it's not just having the best experts, is having the ecosystem of teams. That's really what's going to make the biggest difference. But yes, I've seen organizations where they have a hard time with enabling teams because it's not, for different reasons. First, it's not always very familiar to them. They expect the experts to be doing the work, the delivery work. And secondly, some organizations also are a bit burned out, between quotes, by approaches to things like centers of excellence, where things didn't really turn out as they expected, because from my point of view, the interactions were not right. The center of excellence, if it's just kind of sort of bringing out guidelines and telling teams what they should be doing without actually being on the ground, then that typically doesn't work that well. So the enabling teams are very different, but it's something new for many organizations. And one way to address that, by the way, is you might have some teams where, for example, especially if you have a platform, if, for example, you have some monitoring services in a platform, then probably that team has knowledge around monitoring, and they can do some enabling work as well, helping some teams learn more about monitoring, for example. But ideally, you'll end up with dedicated enabling teams. But if you can't, at least start allocating some effort from existing teams on doing enabling work.
Now I'll jump in the line a little, but the answer should be quick. What is the organization size, which is, what is the minimum number of developers involved to start thinking in terms of team topologies?
We've had interest from all sizes, but there is one of this kind of is also a sort of trust boundary. So in the book we talk about Dunbar's numbers. So one of those kind of boundaries, of course, is not an exact number, but it's a sort of boundaries around 40, 50 people in a group. It starts to become much more difficult for everyone to know everything, and you start to have more teams that are kind of further away from each other. And so definitely at that point, ideally, you already have introduced at least the ideas of platform, the idea of some enabling work, even if you don't have a dedicated enabling team. So I think at any size, you can start introducing the ideas, but definitely when you go over this sort of boundary, 30, 40, 50, which is where you see often growing startups that start to try to accelerate, and they start hiring more people, and they start running into issues where why can't we deliver as quickly as we used to when we were 20 or 10, and why don't I know about this other offering that another team is doing and I don't know about it.
Yeah.
So the dynamics really change, and even the trust between people and teams changes when you cross that sort of boundary.
Yep. All right. So
Cool. I'll move on then. Thanks both. So we have a question from Jim. Thanks, Jim. So with the prevalence of data science as a discipline, do you see any patterns for how such teams can exist within Team Topologies?
Hi, Jim. So I've worked with Jim. It's great that you're watching. So that's a really good question, and it's actually something quite with a lot of focus today. And what we've seen is many organizations, and if you talk about data science and teams focused on machine learning, for example, is they tend to introduce these teams as a dedicated team, right? Which maybe makes sense when you're starting, because you haven't done this before in the organization. 6-7 years ago, many organizations had never done mobile apps. So when you're starting, makes sense to get some experts in that domain and maybe have a team that starts that work. But then over time, if you really start to make widespread usage of machine learning, for example, you start running into some potential problems where if you have a team that's just doing machine learning, their kind of incentive is to get more models. And are those really helping the business? Are those really helping our customers? Not sure the incentive is there. So maybe we need at some point to understand, okay, this was a dedicated team, but if effectively what we need is to have those skills, to have those capabilities more widespread in the organization. So at that moment, you might want to start to reconsider, should this actually become a sort of enabling team helping the streamline teams or the product teams to learn about these models and how they can use them and validate when they make sense or not. So I think if you have this awareness of the need to evolve the organization, evolve the teams, you will realize that, okay, now we're at a point where having a dedicated team doesn't work anymore. We need to spread the knowledge across our product teams, perhaps. Or we need to start having some sort of platform services that help teams do this faster in an easier way. And we need to think about, for example, how the machine learning models are going to run in operations in a scalable way, run in production in a scalable way. So the key point is to be aware of, do we need to evolve? What are some triggers that indicate, well, this is not working as well anymore because we have expanded this to a point where we need to change our dynamics and our teams, perhaps.
Yeah. It is interesting because while you were talking, I was thinking about which are the signals which might force you to make a switch from a given state of the organization to another one. And the bad news, these signals are there, but they are usually invisible. It's just, it has to do with the availability of people, with the personal queue, waiting time, how many unread emails in somebody's inbox, the response time, people availability for meetings. But even if it's there, organizations don't really look at those indicators that much. So you might find out getting stuck into a model which was a great idea 3 months ago, but now it's getting obsolete, maybe because it just worked too well, and then create more demand and went into creating another trap.
Yeah, that's really important, where we need to be sensing for these signals that maybe we need to change. Like you said, if we are depending on one team and that team starts to have a very big backlog, and they're not able to respond when we need, then that's a pretty good sign that we should be thinking about an alternative way. But we go back to something we discussed in the beginning. Who is looking at this, right?
Yep.
So with one client that we worked with last year, it's interestingly, they have a very strong sort of group of Agile coaches where they work with the individual teams, but they also work together as a group, and they have this awareness, and they can see where there's these dependencies that are affecting negatively, and so we need to address that. And so that can be quite powerful. But whoever it is, or if it's more kind of sort of middle management sort of team that has this approach, but there needs to be some sort of entity that's looking at kind of the broader picture of the teams, as well as promoting, of course, that people inside the teams raise these problems as well. But you need at some point to have this sort of cross-team enablers, if you like.
Yep.
Cool. So
it's interesting if I can add, because I saw Eduardo da Silva, he made a comment or a question, because Eduardo gave a talk yesterday at a meetup that I organized, and he was basically giving. He works at bol.com, which is a large retailer in Belgium and Netherlands, and he was telling about the journey for their data science approach, which was exactly like what I said. So they started with dedicated teams, and then over time realized we need this as a capability for all the teams, so we need other sort of structures. So thank you, Eduardo. I hope we'll work on that article to publish that, because I think it's a really good example.
Cool. So is it worth reading his question as well?
I think so, because it's unrelated to this.
Yeah.
Okay, so Eduardo, one on the platform teams. How do you see platform teams working on golden paths for mainstream platform components, but also supporting pioneers who are looking at the new things?
That's a good question. Usually we'd expect the pioneers to be, they taking the cost of doing some of that discovery on their own. So if we're talking about pioneers in terms of some stream-aligned teams that are doing some new kind of work with some new skills that don't exist in the organization, or they need some services or platform type of components, we'd expect that those teams who are not in the platform, but they have a need that the platform team cannot address today, that they will work on that. And so if we understand, that that team needs to take that cost, if you like, of doing that discovery, because there's also limit to what the platform teams can provide. Those teams have cognitive load as well. They have to respond to customers, and if they're successful, they will have more and more customers. So I think the platform should focus on working on the golden paths that you mentioned, make the common thing the easy thing to do with the platform for your internal customers. And the pioneers, if they are in stream-aligned teams, then they might have to do some discovery work, and at some point collaborate with the platform team and say, well, this looks mature enough that maybe other teams can benefit. Or you can start between two stream-aligned teams to collaborate. Oh, you've done this. You've, created some machine learning models. How do you do that? And, can we try to use it in our product or our part of the system, even if it's not in the platform? So there's nothing preventing stream-aligned teams to collaborate and to share good approaches as well.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because it might lead to hybrid state. Like there is a platform guaranteed service, which is documented, backward compatible, and so on. And if you're doing it as a pioneer, you don't have all of these requirements. It's just good for me. I don't care about backward compatibility. Maybe it's good enough to make it available for the public, but maybe it's not yet platform supported. And just like it's here, take it at your own risk. If you want to make it platform supported, well, maybe it has a higher standard of documentation or reliability. Maybe the code needs to be adjusted for everybody's use. And this gray zone in between is not exactly ruled or documented in many places. It looks like or it's private or it's public. not anything in between. But this data exists.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we see that very often where we don't discover this evolution of this, the responsibilities, where it might start with these pioneers, at some point go into the platform, and we need to discover that. But we often, from the beginning, we want to define this precisely and say, no, this is in the platform. So then the pioneers are just going to sit and wait, and the platform team might have already a lot on their plate, and so you start getting into the blocking dependencies and the overload on the platform as well.
Cool. Getting towards the end, we have about 20 minutes and 3-4 more questions. If you want to ask something, this is the time. We'll try and answer all of your questions. So next one is Valentin. Platforms as big, complex products often need multiple teams. Have you both seen, or can you think of ways to maybe apply DDD to platform architecture to define the boundaries or responsibility of teams?
I don't know if you want to go first, Alberto, or I can.
Well, I was actually going to. Totally yes. It depends which are the services. Like I think the driver we are both looking at is one is reducing the cognitive load. So finding bubbles, models which have one clear defined purpose and which are easy to maintain and possibly also easy to use. So I really love the idea of developer experience as a part of being a platform team. And but of course, like the larger the company, the more the available services to provide. So maybe you don't want to provide all the back-end services to everybody and focus only on a few of them. That's one of the driver. So in general, what we are looking at is keeping the cognitive load small, focusing on one purpose, and the second is keeping also the communication bandwidth as low as possible. If every single service that we're using is a meeting to define how do I use this meeting, what is the SLA? Can you provide us an example? Maybe it's not yet a platform service, it's something that needs to be finished. So yeah, that's more or less the principle.
Yeah. And also when we talk about platform, you also want, in the end, platform is sort of an umbrella term, right? Effectively, inside the platform, we'd expect to see sort of streamlined teams that are focused on a specific service or set of services that they provide to internal customers. So that inside the platform, we also have sort of decoupled architecture of the product, of the platform itself, and also decoupled teams as much as possible. So yes, I think you can use DDD to think about what are the different services inside the platform that make sense to try to minimize the coupling between them. We also have, I don't know if you want to share my screen, Enrico. We have on GitHub, we have some simple tools, because DDD can get quite involved, and I think it's really worthwhile to invest in it, but you can do kind of simpler things. So what you see here is something we call independent service heuristics, where is essentially a checklist with some questions to try to validate, does this make sense as a mostly independent service that we provide in the platform as well as outside the platform? Can we think of specific customers? Can we think of specific costs? And what is the data that's needed? Do we have a lot of dependencies with other services or not? So it's just an example. It's something that we can use to do a quick sort of make sense of what are the different services. Do they look more or less independent? And then you could go with DDD for a more in-depth kind of understanding of what are the different domains and services within the platform, especially if it gets quite big, right? Usually the platforms might start with the more kind of technical aspects of providing CI/CD, providing monitoring, and so on, which is sort of kind of more straightforward to see the separation. But when you start getting into data services and more kind of complicated services, you want to have this sort of approach as well. So definitely, yes, look at DDD or just this simple checklist to try to identify what should be the services inside the platform.
You just made me remind that there is one thing which is really DDD when talking about platform team, which is the fact that the people inside the platform, especially this is a very complex technology, they are so used to see the problem from the inside that they don't. It's very hard for them to see the same model from the outside. So one of the things that is very domain-driven design at this level is to maybe have something like 2-layered APIs. I will provide the services like building blocks. Sometimes we call it IKEA level in the language of the server of the platform team, and maybe slowly design another layer in the language of the user, which is a little bit more client-friendly. And just because it's one of the things that we realized is very, very hard for the people which have been in the platform for a long time to see the world from the outside. So in terms of developer experience, maybe you need somebody else with an outer look. It's very hard, like feeling like people should not know about the thing that I know. It's breaking the brain sometimes.
And yes, we get into the developer experience aspect where you have some good examples, for example, from Spotify. So nothing to do with the Spotify model or squads, but actually their sort of platform team, there was some posts not very long ago, but just to give you an example where they're really thinking of the developer experience and how different teams have different needs and different ways that they want to use the platform service. So for some of their CI/CD services, they have sort of 3 different ways that they can be used. One is almost everything automated, where the teams can just create the pipeline by saying, this is this type of project with this technology, and so then it creates the pipelines for them. That's on one end, kind of the simpler to use. And then they expose the APIs for teams that actually just want to consume the APIs and build the rest of their needs in terms of CI/CD on top of that. And so you have this range where we're thinking about the experience for different teams with different knowledge and different skills. When you can get to that point, it's very powerful.
Okay. We have 3 last questions. If possible, let's answer them. So I'll go straight into them. We have Winfred. I hope I said your name correctly. We have a dedicated team with a lot of experience in Kubernetes, continuous integration and delivery, testing, and even back-end development. We are now growing further. What would be a good practice in how to split such a good team? Oh, sorry, I didn't. There you go.
I think what we were saying before, you could look at those independent service heuristics, or you can go more in depth with DDD. And if you have a team, probably sounds like it might be sort of a large team by now if they have all these responsibilities. Look at how can we possibly break them down into smaller teams that are more aligned with the different responsibilities. So it's interesting because in the book, we have one of the case studies examples is from a company called OutSystems. And they had a similar situation. They had a team called Engineering Productivity Team, where they had sort of accrued these responsibilities over time, and they were growing, and now they were helping with CI/CD, and then they were helping with testing, and then they were helping with infrastructure automation. And what happened was that they had a large team. They had many responsibilities. They were mostly in a sort of firefighting mode, trying to answer all the requests from all these different teams, different areas. And people were not engaged inside the team. I mean, we go back to the intrinsic motivators. you don't feel like you have mastery if all you do is reply to and answer to problems and firefighting. And you don't have a sense of purpose if you have all these different responsibilities and you don't really, your mind is scattered, you're thinking on all these different domains. So in that example, they split that big team into smaller teams aligned to those different areas of responsibility, and that worked very well. Almost from day one, the smaller teams felt much more engaged. They knew what was their mission. They knew what they needed to learn and do, and they felt more autonomy. So if you have unclear kind of how to split this team, because they do many things, look at the heuristics, look at DDD, and also allow time for things to become clear, right? You don't need to make a one-shot decision, and now from next Monday, everything's going to be like this forever. No, just say, we think this makes sense to split like this. Let's give it a couple of months, and let's talk again and see if this makes sense.
Cool. Let's move to the last two, and then we'll set you free. And I guess that's the end for today. So we have Petty. Hello, Petty. So which role in a modern organization should probably focus most on team topologies? Previously, these were sometimes enterprise architects in large organizations, I think.
Well, we hear a lot these days about social technical architects. Well, a lot. We start to hear more. Maybe a lot. This is a bit hopeful. And I'm sure probably you too as well, Alberto, where that means we're, first of all, acknowledging that it's the organization is a social technical organization. So our systems are not, they don't perform well if we don't think about what are the teams involved and how they work and how we make it easier for people to do their work or not. And so maybe the enterprise architects start having this sort of social technical approach. It's more of a kind of a shift in mindset more than the role perhaps, which is we need to think at both the technical aspects and the team aspects, and they need to be aligned. And in the book, we talk about the team-first approach, which means maybe we also need, for example, HR to come into the picture. If we have HR or we have senior management deciding on the teams that should exist and the team structures, that's going to have an impact on the systems that we are able to produce and the efficiency of those systems. So whoever it is, maybe it's a sort of a joint approach between enterprise architects and people in HR that come together to kind of talk about this, or is this sort of social technical architect role that's kind of starting to emerge? Whatever it is, we need to be talking about the two things together.
One thing is if you don't have these roles in the organization, maybe that this responsibility is on you. So maybe start knocking on some door or start playing the card of can we do experiments? Because in many places, this decision is not a decision. So, or it's taken by somebody who has not skin in the game. The teams are feeling the pain. Problems inside the teams are solved by the team, but problems in the team collaboration sometimes are never solved. So you might have to step up if there is no clear responsibility for this one.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it can start anywhere. A team can decide to adopt this more intentional interaction modes with other teams and say, look, you don't even need to call it team topologies or whatever. Just say, well, we think we need to discover something, some boundaries that are not good, or we need to collaborate on some piece of code to try to split the responsibilities. Can we do this for a certain period of time with the goal of achieving this outcome? But yes, I think at some point it will be good to have this sort of thinking as part of the way the organization naturally evolves.
Cool, which brings you brings us to the last question from Eric. Let's see this. So, what are some strategies to change from classic team silos with matching muddy architecture towards streamlined teams in order to improve architecture?
The first thing I would say is to understand what are the streams, right? So when we're talking about streams, might be value streams in terms of the offerings that you provide to customers, that we start to have a better picture. And it's surprising, in many organizations, they've grown over time. They're doing more stuff and they sell more stuff. But when you ask what are your value streams, they don't have a clear answer. So things got muddy, as you said in the question. And so let's first, before we even talk about reorganizing teams or anything like that, let's try to have more clarity on what are the sort of independent streams of value. And you can also have other streams like around regulations and other things. So let's get some more insight on that. And again, DDD is very helpful with that. I saw someone mention wordlay maps that can help you understand, or help you kind of look at the landscape in terms of, okay, we have all these streams, but what exactly should be, commodities versus differentiators for our business. So we actually, that's the kind of the starting point for team topologies, which sometimes people miss. They just talk about, well, we should have streamlined teams and this type of teams. And it's not so much about kind of creating an organizational model. It's more understanding our streams of work. And then we can start looking at the teams that make sense to align with those streams. And then we can start looking at how do we reduce cognitive load on streamlined teams by providing a good platform as a product, by providing enabling teams that help with necessary skills and so on.
Yeah, on my side, it's actually very similar. The only thing is, of course, to get the eagle eye view of possible streams and how the business is going on. I put some stickies on the wall or on the mirror board at the beginning, see where the value streams are, and even the boundaries become fairly obvious. Then, of course, you might have 15 bounded contexts and only 7 developers in the company. And so maybe you're not going to do a lot of sophisticated team splitting in this area, but at least knowing which are the streams, which are the independent models to play with, and the boundaries there, that's something that you need to know. And then given this information, it really becomes not, it's pretty close to obvious, because people are focusing on making a few stakeholders happy at a given moment in time, and also in trying to minimize the communication needed to make it happen. And that's where you want to be, basically.
I don't know if you can show my screen, Enrico, because we have actually an example on our site on teamtopologies.com, which from a company called Pure Gym, which is very much, I think, related to this, where what also happens is that you might identify your streams and then realize, well, we have some teams that are working on software that reaches across multiple streams. And so that's what was happening here at Pure Gym. They had, you see the teams on the left were based on projects. Let's get this project out. And then the system was, a big set of things that any team could work on. So they actually then looked at what are the actual streams. So Pure Gym runs a chain of gyms in the UK. And so they had services for acquisition, for payments, etc. So they started to identify that. And then the next interesting thing is they didn't say, these are the streams and these are the teams aligned to that, and that's it. They said, no, we think this might make sense, but let's have a period of time where we're going to work this out better in more detail. So they had the stream teams that you see here in orange horizontally, and they had some enabling teams around developer experience, SRE, and mobile. But they were clear, for them it was clear that we need some time to have this sort out. What are the boundaries? how can we kind of evolve and understand what we need to do to actually have this sort of more decoupled teams that are more autonomous. So I just thought that was a good.
That is really interesting because also so if you divide by streams, and each stream has its own value, well, some of the streams might not have a continuous need for innovation. But once you have the team, you feel like, oh, I have the team. I have to keep the backlog full in order to make it work. It might not be the optimal choice for the entire organization. Given moment in time, these teams have higher need, while 6 months later, it might be a completely different thing. So just be ready to catch the signal. And a temporary structure, looking for evolution signals, that's probably where I want to be instead.
Yeah, that goes back to what we said before. If you have very strict structures and defined by HR or senior management, then you don't have that sort of flexibility, and you end up with these teams that are sort of feature factory, right? We exist, and we are it's fixed our scope, and we just then let's get more output, but it's not necessarily aligned to the real streams. Yeah.
Cool. And if you're optimized for the cognitive load, well, if a box was kind of untouched for a few months, and then you have to reopen, well, that's optimized for the cognitive load. The time needed to relearn it is not going to be huge anyway. So it's it doesn't have to be continuous reopening of things. So that's not the way the business is calling for evolution.
That's cool. We managed to finish 1 minute after what we agreed on, Manuel. Oh, that's fine. So thanks both for joining us for this meetup. I hope that was all we had to say. If not, there's another chance to meet with Manuel. We are doing a short training course on the 16th of April. You've been seeing the bar going over and over and over all the time down here. So get your tickets. Very close to be confirmed, I have to say. So good chance that this is actually happening. So we are very excited about it. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Alberto. Would you like to say anything to close off?
Just thank you for having me. I think it was really insightful, and we could go on for another hour, but kids have to go to bed. I think someone else said that. And so, maybe we'll see some of you at the training. And I look forward to that in about a month. And on my side, thank you, Manuel, for being here. Thank you, Enrico, for the awesome job in the background and now on the front. Thank you, everybody, in the asking question. Just like a special hello to Morten that I saw a long time ago in Copenhagen, and good question. I had a good time, and that's a lot of good stuff under the hood. So
really cool indeed. Yeah, I didn't thank all of you because I'm very bad and I'm a bit tired at this time. But indeed, thank all of you who did ask awesome questions and made this meetup much more interactive and interesting indeed. So we'll see you on the 7th of April. I won't tell you what is it going to be about, but please subscribe to our channel so that you'll find out in a couple of days. Thank you, everyone. We are learners. To the next one.
See you. Bye. Thank you very much. Bye. Thank you, Manuel.